Oh, there it is.
All right, GFFL, we're back. I'm going to let Bob run the show, and let's just go with it.
All right. So only two things got enough traction that we're going to talk about. I don't want to take a ton of time on this tonight, but I do think I don't want to take things lightly when we're making changes to the league. I think we have a really good thing going here. So sometimes changing things gets me a little bit nervous, but I just want to make sure everybody's at least on the same page, or at least has the option to speak. Thanks for Rich and Frank both jumping in to be a part of this. I know Frank's new, but that's a good sign that he's in here being so active, being so early. So I realize, Frank, you might not have a ton to say on either of these topics, but at least you'll have a chance if you want. The first thing was the quarterback PPR points and taking them away. This has been a long-standing thing. Honestly, I was trying to think about when exactly I did this, and I want to say that it may have even been as early as like the second year that the GFFL ever even existed. So why just?
Hey, what's up?
What's up? So
hey, I'm driving, so just a heads up.
All right. So yeah, it's been in place for I don't know, 11, 12, 13 years, something like that. And I was very naive and young to the whole fantasy thing, so I didn't really know what to do. But I always remember wanting the quarterback position to be of the most importance on the field, because I feel like it's most important on a real football field. So it made sense to me at the time. Now, fantasy has evolved into what it is now. And to be honest, back then, I don't even think PPR for like receivers and running backs even existed yet. To my knowledge, I don't even know if it was a thing. Maybe in, some other leagues, but it wasn't, widely publicized like it is now. This was pretty heavily favored. It seems like everybody wants to get rid of it, which I'm fine with. I just kind of wanted to throw it out there why it was here. When I first started, like I said, when I first started, I just wanted the quarterback position to be most important. But I also get getting rid of it because, for one, we don't offer PPR for any other position. And there's something to be said about just simplicity. Like it makes it easier to follow how many points your quarterback scored if you're not dealing with, if you're only dealing with yardage and touchdowns rather than throwing every 5 completions. I think it's like a half a point or something like that. So with that being said, it doesn't ever come out to like a huge amount of points. I think in comparison to like Rich's league that he runs, I think our quarterbacks in the GFFL were scoring anywhere from 2 to 4 additional points than a standard league. And also, quarterbacks are still, the top 10 quarterbacks in the league are still the highest scorers in the league, above everybody else. So, I mean, it's not like it has to be there for that to be an important rule that we have to keep it or anything. So, that was about really all I had to say. Is it's not a huge amount of points, but I totally understand wanting to get rid of it. Does anybody have any opinions on it one way or the other?
I got a couple thoughts if you guys don't mind me jumping in. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of PPR, and I love the fact that our league is not PPR. And I could go down the reasons that a quarterback completing 20 passes for 100 yards is still scoring well. So I think if we remove the PPR points of it and then just simply increase the amount that they get per yardage. I don't know if we want to like do a bunch of math to see what a good final point would be. I think right now it's 0.2. If we increased it to like maybe 0.5, I think that's like half the points that a wide receiver or running back would get. I was trying to think, what a good stopping point would be. And let's say a running back gets a 200-yard game. I think that's kind of comparable to maybe a quarterback getting a 400-yard game. So, like half the points of what a running back or receiver would get per yard.
Yeah, I think I'd be in favor of that. We got to, and maybe Rich is our guy to figure this out, being a math guy. But I agree. I think, we get running backs and receivers get points for every single yard that they get. 1 yard is 0.1, right? All the way up to, 10 yards being 1 point. I think if we can make it, just even across the board, that quarterbacks are getting the same sort of love without, obviously we can't give them, a point for every 10 yards because then things would get out of control. But yeah, I think you're onto something there. Take away the completions, because you're right. I mean, you have 25 completions for 100 yards. It's not like you're having a significant game yardage wise. You shouldn't necessarily be rewarded for it. It's the same argument I make when a wide receiver catches a bubble screen for -1 yard and still gets 0.9 out of it. Not a big fan. So. Anybody else?
I'll just add, I guess, really quickly. And again, I really am fine either way. I don't think it's a huge deal. But the one thing I would say is when we're not a super flex league and you're not looking at the quarterback competing with any other position, I mean, quarterbacks are quarterbacks for everybody. So in a way, when we're starting one quarterback, it really doesn't matter if those quarterbacks score 5 points or 500 points a week. The playing field is level because we don't have the super flex part of it. So I'm not trying to diminish the argument or the conversation here, but at the same time, it really doesn't. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's going to be a uniform change across the board. So I don't know that it's really going to have much of an effect one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I agree with Rich. I don't really see the fantasy impact. Like, if you would take a look at every game played and apply the point total, which I'm not going to do this because I'm too fucking lazy. Or freaking sorry. But if you would take that scoring manner that we're moving to and put it into effect for every game played this year, I can't really imagine it affected that many games. And I don't see it affecting that many games in the future. So I really don't care either way. I think just for the uniform of it, I'm in favor of the change personally.
Okay. Hoover?
I'm kind of like indifferent. I think if there were a conversation about PPR all around, then I'd probably be, I'd have more to say. I mean, the fact that they're the only ones that were receiving it, and then now they'll be taking it away. I don't know. It just doesn't. That's not something that I'm worried about or really have much of an opinion on, I guess. Lance is in here. Matt, I'm going to try and remove you, and I just want to see if it keeps you within the actual StreamYard. I thought I got up to 8. I guess I only get up to 6. So I'm going to remove you, Matt, and see if you stay in the lobby part where you can see everything, and then I'm going to let Lance and see if Lance has anything to say.
All right.
Yeah, you're still in here, Matt. Okay. All right, Lance, you're on if you got something to add to it.
You're on mute, Lance, by the way. Frankie, you got anything while we're waiting for Lance?
I mean, I'm pretty much the same as everybody. I mean, it doesn't matter either way to me.
I didn't want to, like I said, I didn't want to spend a ton of time on this because honestly, I just don't feel like it's super important.
It's not a huge impact. Well, I mean, you might get like one game impacted by it a year.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. I think we can adjust the quarterback points, per yardage to kind of go along with, what would be similar to a running back or receiver. What's up, Lance?
Have some fucking technical difficulties over here.
Right,
I missed the entire first 10 minutes. So.
All right. So mainly we've only talked about the quarterback and the PPR points and the possibility of taking them away. Essentially, the consensus so far has been that it's insignificant because, as Rich said, we there's no super flex. We're only playing one quarterback, so whether the quarterbacks score 5 or they score 500, I don't think it really matters. I understand taking the points away per completion, and White just made a point about quarterbacks that maybe complete a bunch of balls for not a whole lot of yardage. It'd be similar to a wide receiver catching a bubble screen for 1 yard and getting a whole point for it just because they caught the ball. I think we can maybe make adjustments to the points to where it's more in line with what running backs and receivers are scoring, like 0.1 per yard, sort of thing, to just kind of even it out with also taking away the PPR point for the completions is all. So I didn't know if you had anything in particular about the topic. Everybody seems pretty indifferent and doesn't really seem to care too much. I didn't want to, harp on it too much.
I voted to change it just because to keep consistency with the PPR catch per point per reception. Why should we give points to quarterbacks for completions if we're not going to give them to wide receivers? It really doesn't really bother me that much. I'm all for yards and touchdowns.
Yep. Yeah, it seems to be consensus of everybody. All right. This is going to be obviously the big topic of discussion here. Moving to a full dynasty league. Now that's a very broad term. First of all, what does full dynasty mean? I think it can mean a lot of different things. There's different variations of it. If you do a little bit of research, there's some leagues that keep everybody. Whoever's on your roster, you keep them until the next year, and then there's some sort of draft situation, and then there's a certain date that you have to get your roster down to a certain size. I don't know if Sleeper offers us that ability to do that. I don't know if they do, because I don't think I can change the roster size mid-season. Maybe I can. There's also, for example, our rosters are 20 players deep, and maybe we keep something like 15 and do a rookie/vet draft that's only like 5 rounds. I also just want to start by saying, keep in mind that anything I say here is just factual things that I've either looked up or just my personal opinion. I don't want to sway anybody or sway anybody's opinions one way or the other. I am obviously going to have my own opinions about what we should do, and I want you guys to chime in on this as well. As I said, and as you all know, our current roster is 20 people. We've always talked during this whole thing, and we've always sort of said like, oh, we're like halfway between a full keeper or a full dynasty and a keeper league. As many keeper leagues, they only keep half of what we keep usually, 4 or 3, sometimes even just 1 or 2. So there's a lot of discussions that have to be had along the way of like, okay, well, how many do we keep? In my head, the number that popped up initially was 15. Which means that the draft would only be about 5 rounds. In my head, I sort of always envisioned when we did go full dynasty that it would also include IDP. I sort of always envisioned that to kind of be the transition that it took. However, the IDP thing got shot down. It seemed like not many people wanted to do the IDP side of things, which
I was surprised by that.
It's honestly, I think the second time it's been brought up, and it's been shot down both times. But also another question I had, and keep in mind here, I've mentioned this before. I try to enter these conversations with one rule in mind, and that is, why does this change? Why is it better for everybody? Why is it better for me? Why is it better for Rich? Why is it better for Lance to do a full dynasty than to not do a full dynasty? When we did if you remember, when we transitioned into the keeper league and we did the 8 keepers, we had a whole season to prepare, which I also think at the very least is what we should do here. I don't think we enter this off season and automatically be like, okay, guys, we're keeping 15, because nobody drafted for that. Nobody was prepared for that. So if this was something that happened, I think that, there's a couple ways we could do it. One of which is, okay, we went from no keepers to 8 keepers. Right away, we didn't slowly transition into it. We went from 0 to 8. Now, did we go from 8 to 15? But if we did do that, I think we need to play this whole entire next year, and we need to draft going into it with everybody being on the same page. That's one. I think another option is as we slowly progress into it, where, maybe after next year, instead of going right to 15, maybe we keep 10. And then we go to 12, and then maybe it's like a 3-year plan, and after the 3rd year you get to 15. And the reason that it scares me, and I've read a bunch of stories on both sides. I've read a bunch of stories about how dynasty leagues are amazing, and it's so much fun, and you get so involved in it and all these things. But I've also read a lot of horror stories about how much things are magnified. We already
I
have
think
a little bit of like teams getting a bad zone and they're down there. Tim Boozie's been in the gutter for about 3 or 4 years and he's finally digging himself out. Rich is dealing with that now. I don't want to get somebody to the point where they can't see the end of the tunnel and be like, it's easy for the good teams to be like, sure, let's do it. Let's hop in full dynasty, keeping 15. Well, there's
Bob.
teams in the league that can't. They're not
ready. I think that's my biggest concern with going to a dynasty is how many guys or gals, you never know, are going to invest that much into doing a dynasty if they take over a team that sucks. And then let's say they're not very good at rebuilding and they're like, you know what, screw this. My team sucks. I'm tired of paying $150 a year to get last place and there's no draft. I get rookies, but I screw myself because I'm an idiot and I trade them away or whatever the case may be. There's going to be somebody who's going to take a hurting the first couple years, maybe 2. And that needs to be taken in consideration in the decision. Everybody needs to be on board and be able to make that commitment. Hey, if my team sucks ass, I'm in it for the long haul. I want to try this out. I want to do a dynasty. That's
the fact is our track record over the last 4 or 5 years. We haven't had 1 year, I think, in the last 5 seasons that we haven't lost someone.
Yeah, that's not
like I'm, it'd be different if we were 6 years running strong with the same 12 guys and we all had a commitment to each other and whatever. It's just hard for me. We lose somebody every year. And if somebody really tanks a team and, trades all their draft picks away and, and then they're like, you know what, screw it, I'm done. I played in this league for 3 years. I paid $450. I'm done with it. And then somebody now I got to try to talk somebody into taking a team that doesn't have any draft picks or has very limited draft picks. Maybe they don't have the first 3 rounds, which that's happened numerous times in the past few years. So we can't even
paid $400 and all I got was a sore ass.
Yeah. So, all right, Hoove, what do you think on this?
I mean, I voted against moving to a full dynasty just because I feel like when it comes to, and this is just a personal kind of thing, I'm in another league that's a keeper league, not as much, and it's not, it's not as in depth as this one, but there's weeks where I have a hard time keeping up with who's in, who's available. And I think things go well now how they are. And honestly, I never even thought about the whole having to find someone to take on a roster because honestly, like some of these rosters that like Matt and Frankie and some of these other guys that picked up coming into it, I don't know if I would have agreed to it. I think maybe like with Matt, he's watched from afar since I've been in the league, and I talk about how great it is. So, maybe you'll be able to get guys like that. But I mean, we've been seeing, we get a guy comes in for a year or 2 and then that's it. So I think it's a tough ask to have someone come in and be like, oh yeah, that sounds really cool. And then it's a dynasty and it's a deep roster and it's really, a lot of strategy and a lot of thought going into it, and it's funny, it's fantasy football, but I mean, honestly, like there's weeks where, I'm surprised that I actually remember to look at something, I'm starting to think about not even doing pick'ems in like suicide leagues anymore because sometimes I forget to pick. So for me personally, I think it would be too much. But that's sort of my thought.
I had an idea, and it's just an idea and a thought, and you guys take it what you want. I voted yes for the dynasty, not necessarily so it could be a full dynasty, but so that we could take a look at the keepers we keep, how many we keep, what positions we keep, how many, how less, how few, how more, whatever the case may be. I was wondering what people would think about sticking with a keeper. It'd be more of a keeper than a dynasty. Maybe we can add up another total amount of players. But what if we limited it to the amount of players you could have at one position? That in turn makes it a little bit more challenging for you to decide who to keep at the end of the season. It also adds value to the draft. Just an idea I thought the other day when I was thinking about it. Like, so you can only keep 2 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers or 1 tight end, 2 quarterbacks, whatever the number is. I guess we'd obviously have to discuss it, but I just didn't know what people thought about that. And
Yeah, we'd
that's
have to
kind of why I
discuss it.
voted for the dynasty, just to kind of get the conversation rolling.
I don't like to get in the way of people's creativity and what they like to do with the roster, because I think that, because then you make everybody's team almost the same, right? If you say, okay, you can have one quarterback, two running backs, then we all enter the draft needing the same amount of things. And I think it changes things. I think that's why it makes it unique is that, hey, Hoover for the last however many years has kept 4 receivers because he's had 4 monster receivers. And we know entering the draft, hey, Hoover's probably looking running back. We know what Hoover's looking for. He's looking for
he
never keeps
that's a great point. That's a great point, actually, because then, then it's all valued. The draft is solely valued on your position in the draft as opposed to the needs of your team.
Right. I like that teams have an identity and they're able to keep the guys that they want. Or, sometimes people, I have a situation this year, I might have to keep 2 quarterbacks, which then forces me to release somebody that is, that I don't want to release. But anyway, Frankie, go ahead, and then we'll get Rich. Rich, you're on deck, and then Whitus, you can close it out, and then Matt as well after Whitus. Go ahead, Frankie.
I mean, I would be like a dynasty would be really fun. I mean, obviously you need a core 12 that aren't gonna leave the league every year. But you can't go from having 8 keepers to 15. Like teams like me and Matt would never be able to catch up. Like if you flip the switch tomorrow and Whitus could keep 15 players, I'm gonna have to play waiver wire all-star all year to even try to compete with anybody. Like it has to be a gradual for the teams that are in the slumps right now to catch back up before you go to full dynasty. Because if you want to do a full dynasty, everybody just redrafts the team, and then you start from there. That would be the only way to be even without going gradually, I would say. I mean, I would go either way, though. I mean, I could play with I like the league with 8 keepers. I would like it as a full dynasty. I just enjoy fantasy. There's some good guys in here, but like I said, you can't lose somebody next year if you're transitioning into a full dynasty. And we're already going to have a new guy next year as it is.
Okay.
So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of that, I guess, quite a bit because my concern with the whole thing is less about the long term and more about the transition. Because the reality is there's a billion dynasty leagues out there that sustain and exist, and it doesn't matter what 12 guys that you have, you're going to have turnover eventually, and those leagues continue to maintain. And Bob and I have talked about this before. There are ways to even the playing field later on without completely stripping the league down and starting over. There are all sorts of strategies that you can use to get new guys on board that have to take over a team, whether it's expansion drafts or, there's a multi, like we're not the first people to run into that problem. My bigger concern about the whole thing is what Frankie just said. How do you make the transition? Because at any point that you decide to make that transition, whether you mean to or not, you're changing the rules in the middle of the game because guys have been building rosters for 8 spots. And when you make that transition to 15, whenever the case may be, so it's like, maybe Frankie and I crawl out of the hole this year, but someone else is going to be in that same hole next year. Or, and you can go as far forward as you want. That's just going to perpetuate. So to me, it's trying to figure out what the fair way is to make that transition. And maybe there's a way to do it. I just think that I perhaps haven't thought about it enough to really be able to hitch my wagon to that horse at this point. But that my concern about the whole thing is being able to make a fair transition if and when that time comes.
Agreed, and that's my thing too. I do worry about that potential of somebody not being able to dig out, and and not that I'm making fun of him or anything, but I think he didn't say this to me personally, but I personally believe that that's why Phil Gross got out of the league. I just think that it was a bit too much for him. I just don't think that he totally grasped the whole concept of rebuilding things, and he kept making little silly moves that I think hindered him more than it ever helped him. And he was just always treading water. Like he never got better. He didn't really get a whole lot worse. And maybe it was just bad luck, and it's a bad, and maybe I'm wrong on my analysis of it, but that was just the feeling I got when he backed out. Like I talked it because I remember when he texted me because I just thought it was really odd. And so I called him and we talked for a while on the phone, and that was just kind of the vibe that I got. And he didn't want to leave. Like, that's why, if you remember, he said bye to everybody in the thing. He was like,
Yeah,
I
he
don't,
did.
you know, he's like, I do got a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. I'm getting married and whatnot. And he's like, I think I should just step away. And I honestly think it was one of those situations that he's dumping $150. I mean, he did it for 6 years. I mean, this guy, I mean, $800 later, he's like, you know what? I just think that I'm not cut out for this. And I just don't think that he was the kind of player that was going to ever be able to dig himself out. And now I think about him in a situation with a 15-man keeper roster, and boy, like he would never get out. Like, and that could be a reality for somebody else that we let in the league. And how long do they stick it out before they realize, like, okay, well, I'm atrocious, I have to go away, and now we got to figure out how somebody can take that team over. So like I said, as everybody knows, I'm a bit conservative, and it scares me. And obviously this is my league. This is probably the thing that I've done longest in my entire life. Like, I've run this league for 14, 15 years now. I don't want to see it get ruined. So I just don't want to take these decisions lightly. I'm not saying that I'm not for it. And like Rich said, I mean, if somebody can come up with something or an idea, or we get a real concrete plan of something that we can hitch our wagon to, like, let's do it. Like, I'm all for it if it's fair and across the board for everybody and everybody's on the same page. So Whitus, I know you in the past, you've been a big, believer in wanting to transition into this. So go ahead. You got the floor.
Can you guys hear me all right? Because, like, my screen froze.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Unfortunately, yeah, we can hear you.
Well, to be even more unfortunate, can you guys see me?
No, we cannot see.
Thankfully, no.
Oh, thank God. All right, I can go back and pick up my nose.
No, that's the good part, is just mute yourself.
You take your pants back off.
That nose so big I could see you got boogers. You need to pick it.
Yeah, as Bob just alluded to it, I've always been a big proponent of it. I would be up for completely ripping off the Band-Aid and making a complete dynasty switch this year. But I also understand everybody made very valid points on how that could make things difficult on others. I will say that even in my down years, on years that I didn't make the playoff, I still would have been very excited to do a rip the Band-Aid off and transition to a full dynasty immediately. So that's my 2 cents there, but I'm also understanding with all the other points that everybody made. So to compromise, I would like to see at least some kind of transition, maybe move from, I don't know, from 8 to 10 to 12, and maybe end up at 15 or 16, somewhere on there. At least that way we can gradually progress into it. Anything that allows us to keep more players, I would be in support of. And the only other thing I kind of wanted to mention that other people have hit on, Bob, I think it's amazing that you have 11 guys year in and year out continuing with the same league, and some guys damn near a decade. I know that you're very hard on yourself, but I think that the fact that we continuously have like 92% of the league coming over year to year, I think that's an amazing thing. And I understand that you want to shoot for 12 out of 12, but I think you got something really strong there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think for many years, I went for years there, honestly, maybe 4 or 5 years straight where we didn't lose anybody. Honestly, I legitimately had a waiting list. It was in my sock drawer. I remember, like, there was like 6 or 7 names on it that people wanted to get in, and I'm like, well, nobody ever leaves, so sorry, I can't do anything. I even talked at one time about making a secondary league for the people that wanted in, like, to try to
The farm team.
Yeah, like a AAA. Like, it's Altoona Curve out there, I am hard on myself now, and I think mainly because like, this was my nightmare. Like, I was like, we transitioned into the keeper in our heyday when we weren't losing anybody, and then we start to transition into the keeper, and shit, we've lost 8 guys in the last 6 or 7 years, and so like, it's just a big change, and it's hard for me to think that the keeper itself doesn't have something to do with that. I mean, that's the only thing that changed. I mean, the only change that we have is that keeper. So to see all these guys leaving, and it's been for various different reasons. Sometimes it's been we've wanted people out, and other times it's been like in Phil's case. I just think that he had a lot going on and just didn't have the time to maybe dedicate to it to get himself out of that hole, or and who else did we've had.
Hey,
Dane, Dane left and abruptly, and so yeah, it's just kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think we're all good and we're all solid. But
yeah, I think I might speak for everybody here. Maybe not. But the keeper league is so much better than a redraft league. Redraft leagues are fun. Don't get me wrong, but there's no continuity in them. Just every year I'll redraft my team and hope for the best, play the waiver wire. With the keeper league, you invest time in it. You think about your team not only this season but next season and the seasons beyond. And for that reason, I think that's why a lot of people or a few people, obviously, the majority of the league, are thinking about maybe a dynasty. And before we change subjects about the dynasty, I had an idea, a thought, if it would, I'm not going to say a compromise, but like to ease the transition. There's a multitude of ways we can go about it should we choose to do that. One of them, I thought maybe instead of keeping 8 this year, let's assume we're going to do dynasty, we're going to do it this year. Instead of keeping your 8 keepers, keep 4. Your 4 most valuable players who are near and dear to your heart, they have to have on your team. Everything else goes back into the draft. Adds a little bit more to the draft. Weaker teams can rebuild off of those extra 4 players per team. It's just a thought I had just now when you guys were talking about it.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I don't think
I will say that like in Tim's, I'm in Tim's league and Rich is in there. Matt isn't. We got to give Matt a chance to talk about it too. But I think something that we went through the first year that it turned to a keeper league over there was that we had 4 keepers, and Matt and I talked about it, and another friend of ours, Billy, and just the feeling of, I think the strategy part when it came to that league, we were all more active and I think more paying attention. And I think it's reflective in the playoffs every year, and it's usually the same people in it for the most part. I mean, I'm surprised he's not smiling. His name's on the damn trophy. I don't know how many times, but what we felt was with those 4 keepers, there really was no advantage to anybody unless they really crapped the bed and just made bad choices. I mean, Rich, I don't know if you would agree, but I just felt like, I mean, if we were to parse it down to 4 this year to add for next year, that could level it up a little bit. I think because I didn't think about what Rich said about someone's always going to get the short end of the stick kind of thing. So that might be a good idea. I also thought, like, what if we did it gradually, like
year by year,
like adding one extra guy, like, and maybe not even start this year, start next year. So I don't know, but Rich, let me hear. What did you think about that whole keeping 4 thing in Tim's?
No, I'm actually really intrigued by that, Lance, because my thought was, like Hoover just said, kind of going in the other direction of slowly building upwards. But as I said earlier, my biggest concern about this whole thing is trying to find a way to make the transition in a way that's fair to people. And in some sense, even though I don't think I would have thought about it in a million years, going in the other direction is counterintuitive as that seems, that actually makes sense to me the more I think about it, to try to get it back and to level the playing field as a compromise to not having to, go back and completely restart like a dynasty startup draft, but at the same time to make it a little bit more fair. Because like I said, my biggest concern is I can't get away from the feeling that it feels like we're changing the rules in the middle of the game, no matter when you do it. But going back to 4 keepers temporarily, I don't know, man. That's intriguing to me.
It is. It definitely is. That's
Can I ask a question now?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
Rich, how many first-round draft picks did you trade for this year?
I think I just have 1 additional. I think I have 2.
1 additional.
I think I just have 2 first-round picks total.
I like the idea of going to 4, but I don't think you can do it going into a draft after already playing a season. Because if I had known,
what we do is we modify it, right? And we'll have to have a short draft, rounds 5 through 8, in the order of finish no additional picks. Everybody gets the same amount.
Yeah, because I would have traded differently. You know what I mean? Like I would have set up differently to know that I was only keeping 4, or vice versa. I would have played my team different if I'm now keeping 10. And I'm not saying that I'm against the dynasty because I'm not. I'm actually probably for it.
Other 4 players that we drop,
but
go on a separate thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Something's cutting out, Mir.
No, I'm sorry, but I'm in. I guess I'm for knowing a year ahead of time so you can plan your team to make the change.
Mm-hmm.
And for the new guy coming in, that's kind of, I don't know. It's a tough ask to say like you're entering a dynasty with a team that you're starting out blank. Yeah, I guess there's ways around that, whether you treat it like an expansion, but it just seems like it's a lot of changes to make it one time in an off season to decide and say, all right, the draft this year, we're cutting it to 4. For me, it kind of helps my team probably overall from where I'm sitting at right now. But I just think for consistency's sake, it's a little unfair to the league to do in an off season. So I like the gradual idea. What's that, Lance?
Oh, I was just going to say I completely agree with you, but just for the sake of argument and thinking about it, what if you did what essentially would be 2 drafts? So at the end of the year, we keep 8. We'll keep our 8. And then there's a deadline where you get to keep 4. And those 4 you don't keep go into the second draft. The rest of the league, the rest of the players available, free agents, all that, we do our normal draft. Then once that draft's over, we have the remaining players available. And it could even go by, lowest seed period, who finished, or however we want to do it. But then that lets everybody have an opportunity to get those players. I don't think it's going to be perfect for everybody. It goes back to what you said, preparation. But if you were going to do it and you wanted to do it this year, that might be a way to get it done.
I think if you were going to do that, you would have to do it in reverse order. We'd have to cut our rosters to 4 and then get everybody to 8. And I don't really even think it matters, to be honest. I mean, we could throw all those players in the pool and get everybody to 8. And then now everybody's got their main 4. We have, maybe helped some teams that were like Matt's team or maybe Rich's team that we're trying to rebuild. It will hurt a couple teams like myself, Whitus, Allen. We'll be forced to drop a lot of talent into the pool. And then we have our normal 12-round draft from there would be a way to even the field a bit. Now, I don't know, to somebody like Allen or even somebody like Whitus. And I know Whitus is just big time in favor of the full dynasty league. So to be honest, he'd probably be up for it because there's an excitement level there for him about just building something, I think is what it comes down to for him, that he enjoys that whole, like the roster control and everything that goes along with it. So he would honestly probably be okay with it, and he can, chime in whenever. But I would wonder like what Allen would think, because, Allen has spent the last 3 years making some controversial moves at times that people are pissed off about or whatever. And now all of a sudden he's got to, once again, like Rich said, we're now changing the rules in the middle of the game, and it goes that way too. It's one way to talk about the teams that are at the bottom that are now expected to have to change the rules, but it's also that Allen has been knocking on the door for 2 years to get his name on that trophy. And it might not have to make a far trip from Phoenix to Tucson next year as Whitus mails it to him. Because he's right there. Like, so now if I'm Allen, I could see him potentially being like, what the hell? Like, I spent the last 3 years getting here, and now I got to only keep 4 of these guys. Like, that's tough on that side.
Yeah, that's why I think gradual is the only way, man.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm not against that 4 option. I think it's very intriguing to think about. And I think gradual potentially too. But one thing that I think I would stand very adamantly on not doing is I don't think we choose 15 this year. Like, there's no way. Like, yeah. Nobody planned for it. Nobody drafted that way. Nobody did anything to prepare for it. I think we would do our normal 8, knowing that, hey, after next season, we're going to keep X amount of players. And I think because it does change the strategy.
Yeah, if you
I agree with you.
Here, and then we come up with something pre-draft that everyone agrees on to transition, whether it be the idea of keeping 4 at the end of the season, or the idea that everyone in the league is in agreement with we're going to go to 10, and if you're a bad team, you have the year to try to transition and make it better. I'm okay with that, even myself being one of the lackluster teams in here right now, as long as I have that year to prepare and try to make some moves, and whether it's try to get draft capital or some guys or something, just to make the team a little bit more my own, knowing that I have to now keep 10. And I think, probably Rich would probably be kind of in the same boat. Maybe Frank, I don't know.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? And I don't mean it to be disrespectful or anything. I'm just curious as to the thought process. So I agree with I actually really do agree with gradually getting our way into a dynasty league as opposed to maybe 4 or drop your whole team, whatever the case may be. But you made the comment that teams didn't prepare during the season for a dynasty league. My question is, what makes it different? Like, did you, or not just you in particular, do teams look to make trades to get higher in the draft or whatever the case may be to pick up players that you think other teams are going to drop? Because
Rich,
that's what our draft is.
I want you to chime in with your comment you made on the phone to me earlier.
Right? Yeah, so I can chime in. And again, I don't know how widespread this is, but I was telling Bob earlier, like, for example, and again, this is an N of 1, but an example would be my team this year. I threw in the proverbial towel about week 10 when I knew there was no way I was going to make the playoffs, and I started making moves for next year. If I knew all of a sudden that we were going to get to keep 15 guys, I would not have unloaded Mike Evans for a late first-round pick.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I get.
And Allen Robinson.
And Allen Robinson. So to Hoover, I traded a 2-for-1 deal to Hoover, getting rid of Allen Robinson, and I traded Mike Evans away to Bob. And the only reason is because I knew I had 11 to 12 guys that I really wanted to keep. And because I knew I had to cut 4 of them or 3 of them at least, I went ahead and got rid of the guys that I thought would extract the most value from the trade market and kept my younger guys that I wasn't confident the younger guys that I wanted to keep were not going to be able to be picked up by me in the 2nd overall pick. And I wasn't confident that those younger guys would be around by the middle of the 2nd round. So I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I dumped the talent that I thought would bring back a good trade value or the best trade value, but I would have done that very, very differently if I knew I was going to keep 15 guys.
If you're keeping 15, you still have Mike Evans and Allen Robinson.
Absolutely.
No, that makes complete sense. I did not think of it like that. So yeah, I agree 100%.
I think we're almost coming to the point to where we realize that no matter what we decide on how many keepers, that we almost have to wait a season, because from the top to the bottom, we all start the guys that are really 100% know they're committed next year. We all start making decisions based on the following year. And to be honest, that's kind of trading away certain picks or trading away some of your better players for more picks. And we all made decisions thinking that we're going to keep 8 guys for the following year. I was switching out from my phone to my computer, so I wasn't able to chime in earlier when you're mentioning how I would feel about the 4-man thing. And I understand why you would think I would think that, Bob, but I got to be honest, man, I had a pit in the bottom of my stomach when that suggestion came up, the idea of only being able to keep 4 of my guys. Like, I am legitimately attached to all 20 of my guys. Like, if we said we're keeping all 20 guys, like, that would be like victory in the White's household. Like, I don't want to drop a single one of my guys. So only keeping 4 would just tear me up big time.
Well, I just got life insurance policies on his players.
But that's also exactly, I guess, kind of my point when I said at the very beginning. It's easy to be in a position like myself or yours or Alan's and be like, yeah, we're all for this. But at the same time, I think it truly doesn't, and I still haven't heard an argument yet that we can say by doing this right now and doing it straight to 15 that it makes it better for everybody.
I agree. Now, I would have done that even when I had my shitty years. I would have loved to have keep all my players, but I understand the logical argument in what you just said, and I agree. I think we need to postpone it 1 year and discuss on how we will potentially gradually increase. I think that's kind of what everybody is circling around.
Yeah, I agree, Whitus. I think if we decide as a group to do a dynasty, that it shouldn't be this year, but the announcement should be made as the year goes on. Prepare and mold your team as you want it to be what it's going to be for years on out, minus the trades, the drops,
and that would have been
whatever.
tough. And that would have been tough. Like if I was coming into the league with the team that I saw on my sheet when Bob sent it to me last year and said, "Oh, by the way, this is a dynasty league now. You have to keep all of your guys." I didn't have 8 that I wanted to keep. I ended up keeping 3 quarterbacks coming into this year because I had 2 rookies and Tom Brady. And that's how bad the rest of my roster was. So, like, it would have been very hard for me to say, like, yeah, let's do this dynasty thing. I'd have been with no options from waivers, with not that many draft picks to take. A lot of the guys that are on my team this year that I'm keeping, I found in the draft from this year. So that's another reason, I guess, for any new guy coming in, I know what that feels like. So I'm kind of looking out for them potentially too, maybe.
Just kind of spitballing here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lance.
Thanks, Wes. I was going to let you go, but since you gave it to me and for sake of not interrupting each other, the more and more we talk about going into a dynasty during this conversation, the more and more I feel like maybe a keeper is the way to go. And maybe, if anything, we add a couple players to the keeper roster. Just my thoughts.
I think there's a weird line somewhere. I don't know. I've said this to Rich in the past. I've said it to a lot of people. I put my neck on the line when I went to 8. Like, it was so unheard of, and I still don't even know of any other league that keeps 8 people. It's a weird thing. And for whatever reason, all the research I did back then, I landed on the number 8 for some reason, and luckily for me, it worked out, and it's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, I think that there's a line somewhere that, like, how many more do you add before you're just like, all right, like, we might as well just keep 14 and be done.
The more people you add to your roster, the more the draft is just going to be rookies and depth.
And honestly, our rosters are so goddamn deep anyway. Like, there's nobody to pick up on the waivers. Like, very rarely. It's nothing.
And that's something else that I want to throw out there too. And again, maybe others don't feel this way, but I'm just going to be selfish here for a minute and take the platform. I mean, I think this is pretty evident. Bob and I have traveled for the draft before, and I know Whitus has as well. And although Whitus, you're not really helping my argument here at all, but the draft means a lot to me. Like, I'm a big proponent of drafts. I think draft season is it's like my freaking Christmas. I mean, I love fantasy draft season. And to me, having this 8 keeper situation where you still put your spin on a team, but at the same time, drafts are still really important. You build. I mean, Matt, you just said it. You were able to start the rebuild mode just by drafting well. So when you go to a dynasty league, that's something to think about. Is your draft changes tremendously. I mean, there's still some rookies that are going to impact teams, but you're changing the dynamic of how the draft plays into a fantasy league. And, coming fresh off of, one of the things that we want to address is, trying to get the guys together for the draft. I mean, cutting the legs out from under the draft by going to a dynasty league. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a problem, in and of itself, but it's just something to think about as maybe an unintended, repercussion to this is the draft becomes a lot less significant, and it becomes a lot less likely that guys are going to get together and, we're going to try to build that bond that we've been talking about. So, myself, that's a big concern for me. And again, it's not a knock on a dynasty. That's not it at all. I think a dynasty league for a lot of other reasons is really cool, but I think we need to at least surface the fact that the reality is the draft just becomes less important. And that's been my understanding even before I got into the league. The draft has just been something that's pretty big and pretty unique for, how we've treated it, in the GFFL. And I don't know. I personally think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the one thing that's changed our draft, Hoover, and this as well as anybody because you've been there from the beginning, is our league changed a lot when we stopped getting together, or whether, we were Obviously life happens and we all kind of move different directions, but we used to have a much tighter knit. And I could even go back and make the argument of, man, when we used to get together, nobody ever left the league. That was back when we were getting together every single year. Nobody ever left the league.
Yeah,
we
but
were getting together, playing poker, or playing wiffle ball and all that shit. You know, it was fun.
I think the flip side of it is, though, like the season of life that we're all in is different too. I mean, it's just harder to make that happen, especially whenever we're all across the U.S. now. I think, you know, you can say that the league was better because the draft was attended by everyone and everyone felt a lot tighter knit. But I also think too, it's, you know, I think it's a tough ask. I think it's just the season of life that we're all in, you know.
Agreed. Yeah.
Hey man, we're in a video chat right now. I mean, draft 2021.
Y'all.
I can't smell you, Lance.
I'll send you some mail. I'll send you my wife's underwear.
So the more that like I was listening everyone talk about the dynasty thing, I honestly like, and I don't want to do this. I'm just trying to think of it as like a fair way. And if you think about it, and I don't know if it's relatable or not, but like to an expansion, like they don't make the other teams give up like their best players, and you know, like not that we'd be cutting it down to 4 or whatever, but the league or the association doesn't just say, all right, we're going to make you guys half decent. You know, I think if the goal is to be a dynasty, I mean, Bob, the way, you know, you navigate everything, you know, you think things through, I think it has to be a slow process. And I don't think it could be two players, like, I think it has to be, we keep it the same this year and we draft how we normally do. We keep the same amount of players. You come to the table with some kind of plan for next season. And in my opinion, it needs to be slow. If it's having one more keeper for the next season or two, like I think the faster you try and move it and make it a dynasty, I think the more like of a disadvantage it would be. And I know I'm kind of going against myself with what I just said with it, like if you compare it to an expansion, but I think slow and steady, I think that in my opinion, that's how I would rather see it. Cause I mean, I'm not even sure if I want to be a full dynasty. You know, I'm more on the fence of I'd rather keep it how it is. But that's just sort of my 2 cents.
So what I think I'm going to do is, yeah, go ahead before I wrap it up.
All I was going to say is, you know, it'd be interesting to get a conversation going with everybody who voted for the dynasty and to hear their reasons why. Because I think this conversation this evening has pretty much boiled down to 2 points. Either we keep the keeper or we very slowly, gradually integrate into a dynasty.
Yeah, or I think going back to 4. Well, that's the unfortunate part of it. I did my best to get everybody in here. We got 7 of us, so we were missing 5. You know, it is what it is, unfortunately. But I think that the one point you made about taking it back to 4 and maybe kind of, you know, redrawing things a bit, I had some traction. So typically for the new guys, just so you know, what I typically do, I'm gonna sleep on this for a couple days. I may reach out to a couple of you individually and get some opinions of what you think. But ultimately, what I like to do is I'm gonna give everybody about 4 options. And we may end up having to vote twice, as sometimes we do. But the reason I do it that way is I don't want to make a misstep here. I think there's a lot at stake for a lot of people. And I think, you know, moving too quickly sometimes is a mistake. So I'm going to give 4 options, all of which are going to be things that we discussed tonight, one of which going full bore. Hey, we're going to go straight to 15, you know, maybe even after a year. The other one will probably be, you know, let's take a step back, do 4, kind of redraft things, get everybody back up to 8, and then start it from there. Another one could be, you know, the slow and steady, or the last option is probably going to be don't touch it. Let's just leave things how it is. And those are probably going to be our 4 options of things. So that's what I asked, you know, the rest of you too, you know, over the next couple of days here, just think about all the things that we discussed. And really, ultimately, you know, what do you want? You know, if are you making a decision simply based on your current roster? Are you, if your roster was different, would you have a different opinion? All of those things matter, and it obviously it's more of a negative for those that don't have the strongest roster right now. But I definitely think, however we do it, it needs to be fair, as fair as it can be. Whether that's taking a step back or maybe just not doing it at all. Maybe a dynasty league is something that you start from the ground up, and maybe we just need to make a whole new different league if that's something that we all really want to do. But unless anybody's got anything else pressing, that's about all.
Bob, let me throw Frank in here real quick. I don't think he's been on for a minute, so let me.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm gonna remove Lance here real quick now.
I was talking a few times. I completely forgot I wasn't in the room.
That's my fault.
No, you're good.
You could have thrown something in the chat.
I agree with all you guys said. I think it's got to be a gradual thing. I mean, Bobby's going to put it up for a vote. I just think you can't flip a switch because it's either going to hurt good teams, it's going to hurt bad teams. Gradual is the only way to level it out, I think. To get the league where we want it to be. I personally would be fine not even doing it and just keeping the 8 that we've been playing. I already planned for next year. I built my core for next year as it is. So, we would have to have something going into before the draft. Because if we don't have a league plan set out for the fall, I'm just going to draft again like I'm keeping 8 people again.
Yeah, I'm going to make the executive decision right now that we will not do anything different this offseason.
Yeah.
We will keep 8, and that's going to be it. If we do make a change in the future, it's going to be after next season.
Yeah.
That gives everybody at least
that's
an
perfect
equal
time
chance to plan.
Yeah, and when teams can bring their stuff back up, get their team back and working. It's just tough. If you did 15 right now, Whitus is probably going to win the title for 7 years. I mean, he's got more depth. There's going to be no depth for anybody else. My team's going to be horrible. Matt's going to be horrible. We snuck into the playoffs. You know what I mean? We're on the up and up. I just think it's got to be gradual. That's the I like Dynasty too. I want IDP. I want to play. You draft a whole defense. I've been doing IDP for 15 years.
I do play in Frankie's IDP.
That is where the strategy. You can have the best. Whitus can have that same offensive lineup. If you know how to play defense, you negate his whole offense. It's where it's at, dude. I'm telling you.
It's a whole different level of strategy, which is why
Rich, I got a spot. If you want in, I got a spot open. I probably got a few spots, to be honest, in my league next year.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. I might just be into that.
I'm kicking it. There's a couple people. I'm trying to build.
If you haven't played IDP, you should try to find a league, as it's a whole different level of fun. Just I actually enjoy setting my roster up in Frankie's IDP league more than I do in the GFFL, just because it's just so.
If you like the total control of your roster and you're drafting linebackers, I mean, you'd be crazy. The draft for rookies would be crazy if we did IDP.
And the benefit to the IDP is you don't lose points when the defense gives up points. It's not necessarily your fault that the safety tripped and fell and he gave up an 86-yard touchdown, and now you're losing points for it. If your linebacker's getting tackles or your end is getting sacks or interceptions or whatever.
That's why I'm surprised nobody wouldn't even add one IDP position, one linebacker.
I just think it's unknown to a lot of people. Not a lot of people.
It's so fun.
Even the projections and stuff that are posted by Yahoo are horrible. Even Yahoo doesn't know what they're like. They're like, this guy.
You have to know how to draft, or you can draft a defense of all zeros.
Yeah, it's pretty tough because they don't rank the players like that because it's just such a, it's not as common, I guess.
But that's it. I mean, I'm for whatever, man. I like the league, but I just don't want to see it get too crazy, too fast. That's all.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. I appreciate you guys jumping in. I think it's important. I think we all made some good points and had, different views and different things going on. So I appreciate you guys hopping in. And like I said, give me about 48 hours. I think I may reach out to you guys individually and pick your brains a little bit, as I like to do, just so that I can make sure I'm giving us the 4 best options, at least to start. And the only way that we won't go to a secondary vote is if something if we get a majority right off the bat with 4 options, then it's pretty clear to me what we need to do. But if it's pretty spread out between the 4, we're going to take the top 2, and cut it down to those 2 options and revote. and get it to one final conclusion. So you guys will be hearing from me within a couple days.
Sounds good.
Cheers, guys.
All
Thanks,
right, boys. Have a good one.
Thank you,
See ya.
guys.